Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something huge. We're talking about a silent, impending crisis that basically threatens the very foundation of our survival, our food supply. Specifically, we're zooming in on ground zero for this issue, Western Australia. You see, as climate change scrambles weather patterns globally, agriculture is facing this massive, invisible thirst caused by increasingly limited water resources. Today, we're breaking down a fascinating study that maps out exactly how severe this threat really is, and more importantly, we're looking at the highly structured, data-driven solutions that might just save the industry.
Okay, let's dive into this. It really brings us to this ultimate existential question for farmers and scientists alike. How do we actually grow food when the water runs out? Because, when temperatures spike, rainfall patterns shift, and the water simply isn't there anymore, keeping crops alive becomes a monumental challenge. We're talking about a scenario where the margin for error in agriculture is shrinking to absolute zero.
Researchers like Charters and Williams have pointed out that Australia, which is already the driest continent on Earth, by the way, has really reached a critical crossroads. The old ways of doing things just aren't sustainable anymore. Historically, when agriculture needed more water, the default answer was, well, let's just build massive new dams or really expensive desalination plants. But recent infrastructure report cards have made it crystal clear. Resources are limited and endless expansion is basically impossible. So we have to make a choice. We either keep trying to build our way out of a drought, which we literally can't afford, or we radically minimize our water use by increasing productivity. Bottom line, we have to do more with less.
And let's be super clear about why this matters. This isn't just some abstract environmental issue. It is a direct, quantifiable hit to our global food supply. As temperatures creep up due to climate change, the amount of water crops need to survive just surges. We are looking at potential decreases in wheat yields of over 20%, and nearly as much for corn. Basically, as the heat rises, water productivity drops. That means for every single drop of water used, we are getting less food in return. To figure out how to fix this, we first have to understand exactly where all that water is actually going.
That brings us to this monster of a word, evapotranspiration. It's essentially the primary mathematical problem farmers are up against. We're literally calculating the amount of water the sky is stealing right out of the ground through soil surface evaporation and plant transpiration. If you want to know how much to water your crops, you have to know exactly how much water the atmosphere is demanding and stealing away every single day.
So how do we actually calculate that theft? Well, scientists use something called the Penman-Monteith method. Without getting totally bogged down in all the massive equations behind it, just know this is the global gold standard for figuring out evaporative demand. It calculates water loss by creating this really fascinating standard reference, a hypothetical grass crop. It's a neat scientific quirk, right? By looking at air temperature, humidity, wind speed, and radiation, scientists figure out exactly what the environment is demanding from this imaginary baseline grass. And once you have that standard reference, you can adapt it to figure out the water needs of basically any crop in the world.
And that is exactly where this incredible piece of software comes in. Developed by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, CROPWAT acts as the ultimate smart calculator for this exact problem. Here's the elegant logic of how it works. First, you feed it climate data using an associated database called ClimeWatt, which pulls from over 5,000 weather stations worldwide. I mean, that's a truly impressive global scale of data. Second, you input the specific physiological details of your crop and your local soil conditions. And finally, CropWatt calculates a precise daily soil water balance. It tells you exactly what the crop biologically requires to thrive, completely taking all the guesswork right out of the equation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happened when researchers applied this tool to 3 distinct testing battlegrounds in Western Australia. The true impacts of climate change became incredibly clear. We've got the Gascoyne region, which relies on groundwater, the Ord region, utilizing surface water, and the Wheat Belt, which is entirely rain-fed, meaning they have absolutely no backup irrigation when droughts hit. The data shows that for Gascoyne and the Wheat Belt, climate change means their crops now have a significantly higher water requirement. Interestingly enough, the Ord region's conditions actually resulted in a lower or similar water requirement. But overall, the baseline is shifting, and farmers desperately need new strategies to adapt.
Naturally, human instinct tells us, hey, let's just build a bigger bucket, right? When faced with a water deficit, the first, most intuitive solution that comes to mind is rainwater harvesting. It makes logical sense. If precipitation patterns are becoming extreme, why not just build earth-retained storages to capture the heavy rainfall and save it for the dry, non-rainy days of the agricultural phase? It's your classic strategy of saving up for a rainy day, just, reversed.
But here is the massive plot twist of the study. That intuitive solution
it completely failed. Rainwater harvesting in this specific climate proved to be entirely useless. Why? Because the harsh environmental losses, specifically pan evaporation and a staggering 2.9 millimeters per day of soil seepage, vastly exceeded the actual rainfall they could collect. That 2.9 millimeters of daily soil seepage literally drained their efforts. Trying to store water over a monthly period just resulted in extreme unsustainable losses. However, the researchers found a stunningly successful alternative: crop scheduling. Actually, scraps that. It's more like crop synchronizing. Instead of trying to force the water to wait around for the crop, they decided to synchronize the crop's entire life cycle with the natural rainfall patterns and lower evapotranspiration periods.
To make this work, the researchers used that CROPWAT software to iterate planting dates over and over again until they found the absolute most efficient growing periods. They created what are essentially emergency sowing guidelines. By just shifting the day the seeds go into the ground, crops naturally avoid the absolute worst of the high evapotranspiration periods. For example, they found setting wheat to a critical sowing date of April 21st or sugarcane to October 17th worked wonders. Think about that. It's not a billion-dollar dam. It's literally just changing a date on a calendar.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real issue on the ground. The data reveals a profound logistical failure. There is this massive gap between the water farmers are currently applying and what the crops biologically require to thrive. Where irrigation is available, farmers are simply applying as much water as they feel is needed. They are completely overshooting the actual requirement. It's all based on traditional habits rather than biological data. And as a result, they're inadvertently wasting a vital resource.
When you break down standard practices for notoriously thirsty crops, like bananas, sugarcane, and rice, the overuse is just staggering. Because the current crop development periods are totally out of sync with natural rainfall patterns, irrigators are being forced to constantly overwater just to keep the plants alive against the relentless demands of the atmosphere. The applied water just vastly outpaces the precise CROPWAT requirement.
So, what happens when you implement those emergency sowing guidelines and actually sync the planting dates with the data? The water savings are absolutely incredible. Just by adhering to the calculated crop schedules, sugarcane saves 9.7 megaliters of water per single hectare. Bananas save 8.5 megaliters per hectare. Even rice and cotton see significant reductions of 1.9 and 0.6 megaliters respectively. This is fresh water rescued directly back into the region's supply simply by optimizing the schedule.
Now apply those per hectare savings across the entire Northwest irrigation industry in Western Australia, and you rescue 77,380 megaliters of water. Let the sheer scale of that sink in for a second. That is enough to fill countless swimming pools. It's a massive volume of our most precious resource preserved, and they achieved it all without building a single new, expensive dam or some energy-intensive desalination plants.
In terms of overall efficiency, this seemingly simple logistical shift results in a colossal 22% increase in water proficiency for the industry. That single improvement is so substantial that it could potentially reduce the agricultural industry's water footprint ranking in Western Australia from the primary user all the way down to the third. That is the true power of working with the environment's rhythms rather than constantly fighting against them.
So the crucial point, the ultimate takeaway for us here, is that data beats human intuition. Our gut instinct was to build bigger walls, catch the rain, and just fight the drought with brute force engineering. But the science shows us that leveraging precise data tools like CROPWAT to understand evapotranspiration and simply changing when we plant is exponentially more powerful, way cheaper, and far more sustainable for the future.
It really forces us to look at the broader picture of how we manage our planet. If merely optimizing a schedule and changing a planting date on a calendar can save tens of billions of liters of water in just one region of Australia, well, what other looming global climate crises could we solve, not with concrete, but with simple, data-driven logistics? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how we can learn to work smarter alongside our environment.